The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of Windsor Castle as King Charles sat in his private study, reading the latest reports from his doctors. The words on the paper seemed to blur together as he thought about the difficult conversation he needed to have with his family. His health had been declining, and the treatments were taking their toll on his energy and spirit. Kate knocked gently on the door before entering. She had noticed the change in her father-in-law over the past few weeks. His usual bright demeanor had dimmed, and he seemed more withdrawn during family gatherings. As the Princess of Wales, she felt a responsibility to support the royal family. But more than that, she genuinely cared about Charles as a person. "Good morning." "Charles," Kate said softly, settling into the chair across from his desk. "You seemed quiet during breakfast yesterday. Is everything all right?" Charles looked up from his papers and managed a weak smile. The concern in Kate's eyes reminded him of his late mother's gentle nature. Throughout all the royal protocols and formalities, Kate had always treated him with genuine warmth and respect. She never seemed to want anything from him except his well-being. "I've been thinking about many things lately," Charles replied, his voice carrying the weight of unspoken worries. "The responsibilities of the crown, the future of our family, and what really matters in life." Kate leaned forward slightly, her hands folded in her lap. She had learned over the years that Charles often needed time to express his thoughts fully. Unlike others who might rush to fill silence with empty words, she simply waited, offering her presence as comfort. The room felt peaceful despite the heavy conversation. Charles appreciated how Kate never made him feel like he was being interrogated or judged. She had a natural ability to create safe spaces for honest communication, something that had become increasingly rare in his position as king. "I've been watching how you handle everything," Charles continued, gesturing toward the window that overlooked the castle grounds. "Your dedication to William, to the children, to your royal duties. You do it all with such grace even when things become difficult." Kate felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. She had always wondered if her efforts were noticed or appreciated by the senior royals. Hearing Charles acknowledge her work meant more than any public recognition could. "I've had wonderful examples to follow," Kate replied diplomatically, though she meant every word. "You and the late Queen showed me what true service looks like." Charles stood up slowly and walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. The castle gardens were in full bloom, a reminder of the beauty that persisted even during challenging times. He thought about his grandmother, who had faced her own difficulties with such dignity and strength. "Kate, I want you to know that your presence in this family has been a blessing," Charles said, his voice becoming more emotional. "You've brought stability and joy in ways that perhaps you don't even realize." The conversation was interrupted by the soft sound of footsteps in the hallway. Both Charles and Kate could hear Camilla's voice as she spoke with one of the staff members about scheduling changes for the week. Charles felt a familiar tension creep into his shoulders, a reaction that had become more common lately. Kate noticed the subtle change in Charles's posture and expression. She had observed similar moments during family gatherings, when Charles seemed to withdraw into himself whenever certain topics arose or when particular family dynamics came into play. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation later," Kate suggested gently, understanding that Charles might need some time to process whatever was on his mind. Charles nodded gratefully, appreciating Kate's sensitivity to the situation. He had always admired her ability to read people and situations accurately, never pushing when someone needed space, but always being available when support was needed. As Kate prepared to leave, she paused at the door. "Charles, please remember that you're not alone in any of this. Whatever challenges you're facing, the family is here to support you." After Kate left, Charles remained by the window, reflecting on their conversation. Her words had stirred something in him, a recognition of the genuine care and concern she had shown. In a world where so many relationships felt transactional or duty-bound, Kate's authentic kindness stood out like a beacon of hope. 3 days had passed since Charles's conversation with Kate, and he found himself thinking about it constantly. Her genuine concern had touched something deep within him, reminding him of the importance of authentic relationships over formal obligations. He had made a decision that would surprise many people, including his wife Camilla. That evening, Charles asked Kate to join him for a private dinner in the smaller dining room at Clarence's house. This was unusual, as most family meals included other members or were formal state occasions. Kate accepted the invitation, curious about what Charles had in mind. The table was set simply, with just 2 place settings and a few candles providing soft lighting. Charles had specifically requested that the staff prepare Kate's favorite dishes, something he had quietly observed over the years. The gesture was small but meaningful, showing his attention to details that mattered to her. "This is lovely, Charles," Kate said as she took her seat. "It feels wonderfully peaceful." Charles smiled, looking more relaxed than he had in weeks. "I've been thinking about our conversation the other day, about what really matters and who truly supports this family through thick and thin." As they began their meal, Charles opened up in ways that surprised Kate. He spoke about his childhood, his relationship with his parents, and the pressures he had faced throughout his life. Kate listened intently, offering thoughtful responses and asking gentle questions that encouraged him to continue sharing. "You know, Kate, I've come to realize something important," Charles said, setting down his fork and looking directly at her. "In all my years of public service and royal duties, I've rarely had someone in the family who simply cared about me as a person, without any agenda or expectations." Kate felt moved by his honesty. She had always sensed that Charles, despite his position and privileges, often felt isolated and misunderstood. His willingness to be vulnerable with her showed a level of trust that she didn't take lightly. "I think many people see the crown and the title, but they forget there's a real person underneath all of that," Kate replied thoughtfully. "Someone with feelings, worries, and hopes just like everyone else." Charles nodded enthusiastically, grateful that Kate understood what he was trying to express. He had spent so many years surrounded by people who either feared him, wanted something from him, or treated him as a symbol rather than a human being. During their conversation, Charles's phone buzzed several times with messages from Camilla, asking about his whereabouts and when he would be home. He glanced at the messages but chose not to respond immediately, something that would have been unthinkable just a few weeks earlier. "Charles, is everything all right with Camilla?" Kate asked gently, noticing his slight frown when he looked at his phone. Charles was quiet for a moment, considering how to answer. He had never spoken critically about Camilla to other family members, maintaining loyalty even when he felt frustrated or misunderstood in their relationship. "Camilla is dedicated to her royal duties," Charles said carefully, "but sometimes I feel like we're living parallel lives rather than sharing one life together." Kate sensed there was much more to the story, but she didn't push for details. Instead, she offered the kind of supportive presence that had become her trademark within the family. As the evening progressed, Charles found himself sharing more personal thoughts and feelings than he had in years. Kate's responses were always thoughtful and never judgmental, creating a safe space for him to express himself freely. "I want you to know that I consider you one of my closest confidants," Charles said, as their dinner came to an end. "Your friendship means more to me than you might realize." Kate was touched by his words but also slightly concerned about the implications. She cared deeply about Charles and wanted to support him, but she was also aware of the complex family dynamics that could be affected by their growing closeness. "I'm honored by your trust, Charles," Kate replied sincerely, "and I want you to know that I'll always be here for you, whatever you need." When Charles finally returned home that night, Camilla was waiting in their bedroom, clearly upset about his absence and lack of communication. Her questions felt like interrogation rather than concern, and Charles found himself comparing her approach to Kate's gentle understanding. The contrast was stark and impossible to ignore. Where Kate offered comfort and genuine interest in his well-being, Camilla seemed more focused on protocol and appearances. Charles went to bed that night with a heavy heart, realizing that his feelings about his marriage were changing in ways he hadn't expected. Word began to spread quietly through the palace staff about the king's recent behavior changes. Servants noticed that Charles requested Kate's presence at more meetings and events, often asking for her opinion on matters that previously would have been discussed with Camilla. The shift was subtle but unmistakable to those who paid attention to royal protocol. Camilla first became aware of the changes during a weekly planning meeting for upcoming royal engagements. Charles's private secretary mentioned that Kate would be attending several events that Camilla had assumed she would handle as queen consort. The news came as a shock, delivered matter-of-factly as if it were a routine scheduling change. "I wasn't aware that Kate's schedule had been modified," Camilla said, trying to keep her voice level despite her growing concern. The secretary looked uncomfortable, clearly caught between conflicting royal preferences. His Majesty specifically requested the Princess of Wales for these particular engagements. He felt her presence would be most appropriate. After the meeting, Camilla sought out Charles in his study. She found him reviewing speeches with Kate, both of them laughing quietly at some shared observation. The scene struck Camilla as unexpectedly intimate, though she couldn't pinpoint exactly why. "Charles, might I have a word?" Camilla asked, her tone polite but strained. Kate immediately stood to leave, sensing the tension in the room. "I should go check on the children," she said diplomatically, gathering her papers and exiting gracefully. Once they were alone, Camilla sat across from Charles, her posture rigid with unexpressed frustration. "I'm hearing quite a lot about changes to our official schedules that I wasn't consulted about." Charles looked up from his papers, his expression neutral but distant. "I've been making some adjustments based on what I think works best for the monarchy and the family." "And you don't think these decisions affect me?" Camilla's voice carried an edge that Charles had heard increasingly often in recent weeks. "Of course they affect you," Charles replied calmly. "But I also have to consider what's best for the institution overall, not just what's convenient for any one person." The conversation that followed was tense and circular, with Camilla expressing frustration about being sidelined, and Charles maintaining that he was simply making practical decisions. Neither of them addressed the underlying emotional issues that were driving the conflict. Meanwhile, Kate found herself in an increasingly complicated position. She genuinely enjoyed her conversations with Charles and valued their growing friendship, but she was also aware that her relationship with him was causing tension within the family. William had mentioned that Camilla seemed distant during recent family gatherings. "Is everything all right between you and my father?" William asked Kate one evening as they prepared for bed. Kate considered her response carefully. She didn't want to betray Charles's confidence, but she also didn't want to keep secrets from her husband. "I think your father is going through a difficult time right now," Kate said thoughtfully. "He's been more reflective lately, thinking about relationships and what matters most to him." William nodded, understanding that there were probably deeper issues at play. He had noticed his father's changing behavior, but hadn't wanted to interfere in what seemed like personal matters. The next day, Charles asked Kate to accompany him to a children's charity event, one that had originally been planned as a joint appearance with Camilla. Kate felt conflicted about accepting, knowing it would likely upset Camilla further, but Charles seemed particularly enthusiastic about having her there. At the event, Charles was more animated and engaged than Kate had seen him in months. He interacted naturally with the children, laughed genuinely at their jokes, and seemed to draw energy from Kate's presence beside him. The photographers captured numerous images of Charles and Kate together, both of them appearing relaxed and happy. When Camilla saw the photographs in the evening news, she felt a complex mix of emotions. There was hurt, certainly, but also a growing recognition that something fundamental had changed in her relationship with Charles. The way he looked at Kate in those pictures was different from how he looked at anyone else, including herself. That night, Camilla made a decision that surprised even her. Instead of confronting Charles directly about the photographs or demanding explanations about his behavior, she chose to step back and observe. She began declining some royal engagements, citing scheduling conflicts or minor health concerns. Charles noticed Camilla's withdrawal, but found himself feeling relieved rather than concerned. The constant tension and unspoken conflicts had been exhausting, and her absence created space for him to focus on the relationships and activities that brought him joy. Kate became aware of Camilla's retreat, but wasn't sure how to address it. She had never intended to create problems within the royal family, and she worried that her friendship with Charles was causing unintended consequences. The palace staff began to notice the shift as well. Camilla's office started operating more independently, with fewer joint planning sessions and less coordination with the king's schedule. It was as if two separate royal households were emerging within the same family structure. Several weeks passed in this new arrangement, with Charles and Kate developing an even closer working relationship, while Camilla maintained her distance. The change became more apparent during a significant royal event celebrating British cultural heritage. where traditionally all senior royals would appear together as a unified family. Charles had specifically requested that Kate give the main speech at the event, praising her natural ability to connect with people and her genuine passion for British arts and culture. Kate spent hours preparing, wanting to honor Charles's trust in her abilities while representing the royal family with dignity. On the day of the event, Camilla appeared alongside Charles and Kate, but keen observers noticed her subdued demeanor. She smiled for the cameras and fulfilled her duties professionally, but there was a noticeable lack of the warmth and enthusiasm she usually displayed at public events. Kate's speech was magnificent, touching on themes of heritage, community, and the importance of preserving culture for future generations. Charles watched her with obvious pride and admiration, nodding approvingly at her key points and applauding enthusiastically when she finished. After the official ceremonies, Charles made an unexpected announcement to the gathered press. "I want to publicly acknowledge the exceptional contributions that the Princess of Wales has made to our royal family and to the British people. Her dedication, wisdom, and compassionate leadership have been truly remarkable." The statement sent ripples through the media and royal watchers. It was unusual for a monarch to single out one family member so publicly, especially when other senior royals were present. Camilla maintained her composure during the announcement, but those close to her could see the impact it had. Later that evening, at the private reception following the public event, Charles made sure to spend most of his time talking with Kate about the day's success and future plans. They discussed upcoming royal tours, charitable initiatives, and family matters with an ease that suggested a deep level of mutual understanding and respect. Camilla found herself increasingly isolated at the reception, making polite conversation with guests but feeling disconnected from the center of activity that seemed to revolve around Charles and Kate. She noticed how naturally they communicated, finishing each other's thoughts and sharing subtle glances that spoke of genuine friendship and trust. One of Camilla's longtime friends approached her during the reception, expressing concern about the obvious changes in royal dynamics. "Are you all right, Camilla? You seem rather quiet this evening." "I'm perfectly fine," Camilla replied, though her smile didn't reach her eyes, just observing how things are evolving within the family. The friend sensed there was much more to the story, but respected Camilla's privacy and didn't push for details. However, the conversation planted a seed of worry about what these changes might mean for Camilla's position and happiness. Meanwhile, William watched the evening's events with growing concern. While he was proud of Kate's success and pleased to see his father so animated and happy, he worried about the long-term implications of the shifting family dynamics. He knew that sustainable relationships required balance and consideration for everyone involved. After returning home, William gently questioned Kate about her relationship with Charles. "I can see how much my father values your friendship," he said carefully. "But I hope you're also considering how this might be affecting Camilla." Kate had been expecting this conversation and had spent considerable time thinking about the ethical implications of her growing closeness with Charles. "I never intended for things to become complicated," she replied honestly. "Your father was struggling and I simply wanted to offer support." "I know your intentions are good," William said, taking her hand. "But sometimes good intentions can still lead to unintended consequences." That night, Kate lay awake thinking about William's words and about the changes she had observed in Charles and Camilla's relationship. She genuinely cared about Charles and wanted to support him through whatever difficulties he was facing, but she also didn't want to be responsible for causing pain to other family members. The next morning, Kate made a decision to speak directly with Charles about her concerns. She found him in the palace gardens, tending to some of his favorite roses, an activity that always seemed to bring him peace and clarity. "Charles, I want to talk with you about something important," Kate began as she joined him among the flowers. Charles looked up from his gardening with a smile. "Always pleased to see Kate." "Of course, my dear. What's on your mind?" "I'm concerned about how our friendship might be affecting your relationship with Camilla," Kate said directly. "I noticed that she's been more withdrawn lately, and I worry that I might be contributing to some tension between you." Charles was quiet for a moment, considering how to respond to Kate's thoughtful observation. He appreciated her sensitivity to the situation, which only reinforced his belief that she was someone who truly cared about the well-being of others, not just her own comfort or position. Charles set down his gardening tools and walked to a nearby bench, motioning for Kate to join him. The morning air was crisp and clear, and the garden provided a peaceful backdrop for their serious conversation. He had been dreading this moment while simultaneously knowing it was inevitable. "Kate, I want to be completely honest with you," Charles began, his voice heavy with emotion. "My relationship with Camilla has been struggling for quite some time, long before our friendship deepened. Your presence in my life has simply highlighted what was already missing." Kate felt a mix of relief and concern at his words. She was glad to know she hadn't caused the problems, but she was also worried about what this meant for Charles's marriage and the stability of the royal family. "What do you mean by what was missing?" Kate asked gently, wanting to understand the situation fully before offering any advice or support. Charles was quiet for several minutes, clearly struggling with how much to reveal. Finally, he spoke with the kind of honesty that comes from deep trust and desperation for understanding. "Camilla and I have grown apart over the years," he admitted. "We function well as royal partners, but we've lost the personal connection that makes a marriage meaningful. With you, I feel heard and understood in ways I haven't experienced in a very long time." Kate felt the weight of his confession and the responsibility it placed on her. She cared deeply about Charles as a person and as her father-in-law, but she also understood the complexity of the situation they were navigating. "Charles, I'm honored by your trust and friendship," Kate replied carefully. "But I think it's important that you try to address these issues directly with Camilla, rather than simply withdrawing from the relationship." Charles nodded, knowing Kate was right but feeling overwhelmed by the prospect of such a difficult conversation. His marriage to Camilla had been complicated from the beginning, carrying the weight of his previous relationship with Diana and years of public scrutiny. Meanwhile, across the palace, Camilla was having her own moment of reflection. She had decided to visit her longtime friend and confidant, Annabelle, who lived in a cottage on the royal estate. Annabelle had known Camilla for decades and had watched her navigate the challenges of royal life with grace and determination. "I feel like I'm losing my husband," Camilla confided as they sat in Annabelle's cozy living room with cups of tea. "Charles has become so focused on Kate that I might as well be invisible." Annabelle listened with compassion, understanding the pain behind Camilla's words. "Have you tried talking to Charles about how you're feeling? What would be the point?" Camilla replied with uncharacteristic bitterness. "It's clear that he finds her company more enjoyable than mine. Perhaps it's time I accepted that reality." Annabelle was surprised by her friend's defeated tone. Throughout all their years of friendship, she had never seen Camilla give up on something important to her. That doesn't sound like the woman who fought so hard to build a life with Charles in the first place. Back in the garden, Charles and Kate's conversation continued to evolve into deeper territory. Charles found himself sharing details about his marriage that he had never discussed with anyone, including his growing sense that he and Camilla had married more out of convenience and social pressure than genuine love and compatibility. "I think I convinced myself that companionship and shared duties would be enough," Charles said sadly. "But watching how naturally you and William support each other has made me realize what I've been missing." Kate felt deeply moved by his honesty, but also concerned about the direction of their conversation. She wanted to support Charles without encouraging him to make decisions that he might later regret. "Charles, every marriage goes through difficult periods," Kate said thoughtfully. "Perhaps this is an opportunity to rebuild your relationship with Camilla on a stronger foundation." Charles appreciated Kate's wisdom and loyalty to the family, but he also felt a growing certainty that his marriage had fundamental problems that couldn't be solved with good intentions alone. That afternoon, an unexpected encounter changed the trajectory of everyone's relationships. Camilla returned from her visit with Annabelle feeling more determined to address the situation directly. She decided to seek out Charles, planning to have an honest conversation about their marriage and the future. She found Charles and Kate still in the garden, sitting close together on the bench and engaged in intense conversation. From a distance, she could see the genuine affection and connection between them, and something inside her finally broke. Instead of approaching them, Camilla stood quietly behind a large tree, listening to their conversation and watching their interaction. What she observed confirmed her worst. fears and suspicions about the true nature of their relationship. She heard Charles expressing his deep appreciation for Kate's friendship and his growing doubts about his marriage. She saw the way Kate touched his arm comfortingly and the way Charles looked at her with an expression of gratitude and something deeper. Camilla realized in that moment that she was no longer fighting for her husband's attention or affection. She was competing with a woman who had already won his heart, even if neither of them had fully acknowledged it yet. When she finally returned to the palace, Camilla made a decision that would surprise everyone, including herself. Instead of confronting Charles or creating a dramatic scene, she chose to begin planning her own graceful retreat from the situation. Over the following weeks, Camilla's behavior underwent a remarkable transformation that puzzled everyone around her. Instead of the expected confrontations or emotional outbursts, she became increasingly calm and distant, as if she were slowly disconnecting from the royal household entirely. She began accepting fewer public engagements, citing a desire to focus on her personal charitable work. When she did appear at official events, she maintained perfect professionalism, but seemed to exist in a separate sphere from Charles and Kate, who continued to work together seamlessly. Charles noticed the change but found himself feeling more relieved than concerned. The constant underlying tension that had characterized his relationship with Camilla for months seemed to have dissipated, replaced by a peaceful coexistence that made daily life more manageable. Kate, however, was deeply troubled by Camilla's withdrawal. Despite the complex situation, she had always respected Camilla and felt guilty about any role she might have played in the deterioration of Charles and Camilla's marriage. "I think I should step back from some of the royal duties I've been sharing with your father," Kate told William one evening. "Camilla's withdrawal concerns me, and I don't want to make things worse." William had been watching the situation evolve with growing anxiety. While he wanted his father to be happy and supported Kate's friendship with Charles, he also worried about the long-term consequences for the family's stability and public image. "Perhaps that would be wise," William agreed, "at least until everyone can find a better balance." When Kate attempted to reduce her involvement in Charles's official duties, however, she discovered how deeply he had come to depend on her presence and support. Charles became visibly distressed at the suggestion that she might step back from their collaborative work. "Kate, you're one of the few people who truly understands the challenges of this role," Charles said during a private meeting in his study. "I need your insight and support more than ever, especially as I navigate these difficult personal circumstances." The conversation revealed the extent to which Charles's emotional well-being had become intertwined with his relationship with Kate. She realized that withdrawing suddenly might actually cause him more harm than good, but continuing their close partnership felt equally problematic. Meanwhile, Camilla had begun meeting regularly with her personal lawyers and financial advisors, though she kept these meetings extremely confidential. She was exploring her options and preparing for various possible futures, including scenarios that would involve significant changes to her role within the royal family. During one of these meetings, Camilla's longtime legal advisor expressed concern about her apparent preparations. "Your Majesty, are you considering some form of separation from His Majesty?" Camilla was quiet for a long moment before responding. "I'm considering what would be best for everyone involved, including Charles, myself, and the institution of the monarchy." The advisor was surprised by her measured tone and apparent lack of anger or bitterness. "If I may ask, what has led you to this point?" "I've come to realize that love cannot be forced or manufactured," Camilla replied with surprising clarity. "Charles has found something with Kate that he never truly had with me. Perhaps it's time I stopped fighting against that reality." Back at the palace, Charles and Kate's working relationship continued to deepen and evolve. They developed an almost telepathic understanding of each other's thoughts and preferences, making their public appearances and private planning sessions incredibly effective and harmonious. However, this growing connection was becoming increasingly difficult to hide from public observation. Royal reporters began noting the obvious chemistry and mutual respect between Charles and Kate, writing articles that speculated about the changing dynamics within the royal family. One particularly perceptive journalist wrote about the unprecedented partnership between the King and the Princess of Wales, noting that their public interactions displayed a level of genuine affection and understanding that was rare in royal relationships. When Charles read the article, he felt a mix of pride and concern. He was pleased that their positive relationship was being recognized, but he also worried about the implications for Camilla and for the family's privacy. "Do you think we should be more careful about how we interact in public?" Charles asked Kate during one of their regular evening conversations. Kate had been wondering the same thing. "I think people can sense authentic relationships," she replied thoughtfully. "But perhaps we should be more mindful of how our friendship might be perceived by others." The conversation was interrupted by William's unexpected arrival at Charles's study. He looked unusually serious, and both Charles and Kate immediately sensed that something significant was about to happen. "I'm sorry to interrupt," William said formally, "but I think we need to have a family discussion about the current situation. Camilla has asked to meet with all of us tomorrow evening." Charles felt his stomach tighten with anxiety. He had been expecting this moment, but had hoped it could be avoided or postponed indefinitely. "Did she say what she wanted to discuss?" Charles asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "She said it was time to address the changes that have been happening within our family," William replied diplomatically. "She wants to ensure that everyone's feelings and concerns are heard and considered." That night, Charles barely slept, knowing that the next evening would likely bring major changes to his life and relationships. Kate also spent a restless night, worried about what Camilla might say and how the conversation might affect everyone involved, including her own marriage and children. The family meeting took place in the small drawing room at Clarence's house, a space that had witnessed countless important conversations throughout royal history. Camilla arrived first, dressed elegantly but simply, her demeanor calm and composed. Charles and Kate arrived together, having discussed their concerns and hopes for the conversation during the short drive over. William joined them a few minutes later, taking his role as both son and future king seriously as he prepared to mediate what promised to be a difficult discussion. "Thank you all for coming," Camilla began, her voice steady and clear. "I've asked for this meeting because I believe it's time we address the changes that have been occurring within our family, with honesty and dignity." Charles shifted uncomfortably in his chair, unsure of what to expect from Camilla's measured tone. He had prepared for anger, accusations, or emotional outbursts, but her calm demeanor was somehow more unsettling. "Over the past several months, I've watched the relationship between Charles and Kate develop into something beautiful and meaningful," Camilla continued, surprising everyone with her directness. "I've also become increasingly aware that my marriage to Charles has lost much of its vitality and purpose." Kate felt tears gathering in her eyes, moved by Camilla's grace and honesty. She had expected conflict and blame, not this generous acknowledgement of the situation's complexity. "Camilla, I never intended," Kate began, but Camilla raised her hand gently to stop her. "My dear, you have nothing to apologize for," Camilla said with genuine warmth. "You've shown Charles kindness and understanding during a difficult time in his life. That's exactly what family members should do for each other." Charles felt overwhelmed by Camilla's unexpected generosity and grace. He had been prepared to defend his relationship with Kate and to explain his growing dissatisfaction with his marriage, but Camilla's approach made such defenses unnecessary. "What are you saying, Camilla?" Charles asked quietly, though he suspected he understood her meaning. "I'm saying that I think it's time for us to consider restructuring our relationship in a way that allows everyone to find happiness and fulfillment," Camilla replied. "I don't believe that forcing ourselves to maintain a marriage that no longer serves either of us is beneficial for anyone, including the monarchy." William had been listening intently, impressed by Camilla's maturity and wisdom, despite his concerns about the implications of her words. "Are you suggesting a separation?" he asked carefully. "I'm suggesting that we explore options that would allow Charles to focus on the relationships and responsibilities that bring him joy and energy," Camilla explained, "and that would allow me to pursue a different kind of life that might be more fulfilling for me as well." The room was quiet for several minutes as everyone processed Camilla's words and their implications. Kate felt a complex mix of emotions, including gratitude for Camilla's understanding, sadness about the end of a marriage, and uncertainty about what this might mean for her own relationship with Charles. "Camilla, I want you to know how much I admire your grace in handling this situation. Kate said finally, "and I want you to know that I will always consider you family, regardless of what changes might occur." Camilla smiled genuinely for the first time in weeks. "Thank you, Kate. That means more to me than you might realize." Charles found his voice at last, though it was thick with emotion. "Camilla, I'm sorry that our marriage didn't become what either of us hoped it would be. You deserve happiness and fulfillment, and I regret that I haven't been able to provide that for you." "Charles, we both tried to make something work that perhaps was never meant to be," Camilla replied with characteristic honesty. "But that doesn't mean our time together was wasted or meaningless. We've supported each other through many challenges, and we've both grown as people." The conversation continued for another hour, with all four family members discussing practical considerations, emotional concerns, and hopes for the future. They talked about how any changes would be handled publicly, how to maintain family relationships, and how to ensure that the monarchy's stability wouldn't be compromised. By the end of the evening, they had reached a preliminary agreement that Camilla and Charles would begin living separately while they worked through the legal and practical aspects of restructuring their relationship. Camilla would maintain her royal titles and some official duties, but she would also have the freedom to develop her own independent life. Kate and Charles's friendship would continue, but they all agreed that it should evolve naturally without the pressure of external expectations or family conflicts. William expressed his support for whatever arrangements would make everyone happiest and most fulfilled. 3 months later, the changes had been implemented quietly and successfully. Charles appeared more energetic and engaged in his royal duties than he had in years, supported by Kate's continued friendship and collaboration. Camilla had moved to a beautiful estate in the countryside, where she focused on her environmental charitable work and seemed genuinely content with her new independence. The public was initially surprised by the arrangements, but the royal family's honest explanation and Camilla's gracious handling of the transition earned widespread respect and admiration. Kate and Charles's working partnership continued to produce excellent results for the monarchy, while Camilla's new role allowed her to pursue passions that had been constrained by traditional royal expectations. In the end, what could have been a devastating family crisis became a story of mature adults choosing love, understanding, and personal growth over convention and obligation. Each person found a path that honored their authentic selves, while maintaining the respect and dignity that their positions required.